Good morning to you. I'm glad you found time to be with us this morning. My name is Miriam Ogutu. The show is Good Morning Africa. We're coming to you from Kenya's capital here in Nairobi. I trust that your day has started off well. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and joining us. As usual, I'll bring us up to date with the latest headlines and then we'll get into the news in details. We start with Kenya's newspapers. The Daily Nation, Kinoti man on the cross in nasty feud as the new regime probes alleged excesses of officers under him. The former head of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations looks like the man who will perhaps carry the cross of sins of the Uhuru presidency in a political tit-for-tat game that has been gathering pace since the swearing-in of William Ruto. The story is on page 2 and 3. My baby waited 14 hours for a doctor. In a tearful submission to senators, the mother of a baby who died at the Kenyatta National Hospital after a fork jembe accident at home accuses the administration of professional negligence. That story is on page 10. Inside Kenya's climate carnage, pain points for the country as the world converges this week on Egypt for the COP27, the biggest global climate meeting of the year. The story is inside the Daily Nation, and then we just move on to the Standard newspaper. And on the Standard, the main headline, anger greets Haji's shock confessions. In a tell-all interview, Director of Public Prosecution says external forces interfered with his work and even threatened him, but he stood firm. He accuses former DCI boss of not doing thorough investigations. However, Kenyans say he should resign. That story is on page 6. Experts to Ruto focus on graft war than tax reforms. Economists say sealing revenue leakages should be a priority even as a government expands the tax bracket to get more people to pay more levies. That story, you'll find it on page 4. Jumwa says civil servants will get raised in 100 days. All right, some good news in there. The story is on page 9. 133 die in India bridge accident. That story is on page 27. Thousands fight Mau evictions. That story is on page 20. Okay, we just move on to the Star newspaper. The main headline, why Gachagwa's 7.3 billion Kenya shillings graft case collapsed. Former DCI boss George Kinoti declined to comment, asks for prayers. Okay, you'll find that on page 4 and 5. And the main pictorial on the Star newspaper, crippling drought, cows dropping dead, a few clinging on. It's very disturbing pictures there. Unfortunately, that is the reality in some parts of the country. Mwingi family in agony after son went missing 7 years ago. You'll find that on page 2. Raila opens new war front with Ruto over radical levy proposal. You'll find that on page 7. I guess he is really getting into that role of the opposition leader now. Okay, so let's just move on to other headlines across the continent of Africa. We start with, let me see if I have, yes I do, the Daily News from Zimbabwe. A peace summit will foster peace, analysts say, as violence fears ahead of 2023 grows. So, you know, Zimbabwe is preparing to go to its elections next year, and, you know, a lot has been happening there. So there are some concerns about violence that is likely to occur even as the country nears its elections next year. So according to the Daily News, a peace summit will foster peace. Okay, if that is what you have to do to avert that unnecessary ugly situation like we've seen in many African countries, then perhaps that is something, you know, Zimbabwe should consider. Newsday in Zimbabwe still. Voters roll a mess. ZANU PF. The Nation from Nigeria. Tinubu, Adebanjo under fire over Southwest stand. The Guardian also from Nigeria. Dollar scarcity worsens as banks ration withdrawals. BDCs are stretched. The Daily Monitor from Uganda. Thugs kill CID boss in raid on station. And then the New Vision as well from Uganda. Ebola, government plans to shorten school third term. And Pretoria, this is from South Africa. Pretoria News, or Sullivan suffers Phala Phala meltdown. You know, the Phala Phala, that scandal that involves South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, the money that was found stashed in his farm. This is his private farm, the Palapada there, and money was found stashed on furnitures or something like that. So that is a scandal that is ongoing. But also, I think a lot of this, from what I've been saying, you know, they're getting ready for their party elections, I think, in December. So I think there could be some motivation behind this push and why this story has become such a scandal. And perhaps there are others who want to remove President Cyril Ramaphosa as the the head of the ANC party. And in South Africa, you become the president, if you have the majority in parliament, and also if you are the leader of the party with the majority in parliament, and that is the African National Congress, the ANC. South Africa's democracy is a proportional representation, so there could be some politics that motivates this scandal, but also I don't know why President Cyril Ramaphosa would find it necessary to hide money in furnitures. So there is a story in there. Okay. Sowetan, still from South Africa, survivor of shooting speaks. That is what we saw. There was an senseless shooting that happened in South Africa over the weekend, and that is not new. I think several times we've seen that happen in drinking shebeens. I think that's what they call it. And just, the state of insecurity in major South African towns and cities is worrying. And I think there was a report some years back that placed Johannesburg as one of the deadliest places and safe cities in Africa. So there you go. So you're now up to date, but let's get into the detailed news this morning, and we start with Malawi. The number of deaths from cholera in Malawi rose to 183 at the end of October, from 110 at the beginning of the month. The Health Ministry announced on Monday. The rate of infections has been rising. The cumulative number of cases since the outbreak began in March now at 6,056, the ministry said in a statement. Cholera is an acute diarrheal infection, usually caught by eating or drinking contaminated food or water, and is closely linked to poor sanitation. Malawi's health ministry attributed the deaths to poor food hygiene among the community's lack of safe water and a lack of and proper use of toilets. Health Minister Kumbize Chiponda also noted that some patients were not seeking treatment for religious reasons, while others were visiting hospitals when it was already late. He appealed to religious institutions to encourage their members to seek proper health services to avoid unnecessary loss of lives. And then we go to Somalia. Journalists, students and traders are among the 120 people now known to have died in Saturday's bombing in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. The death toll may rise further as the search for missing people continues, and if the condition of some of the 300 people wounded deteriorates, said Somalia's Health Minister Ali Haji. The government yesterday formed a committee led by the Health Minister to coordinate the emergency response, and Kenya, Turkey, Egypt and Saudi Arabia have been asked to send doctors to help. Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who visited the scene of the attack at the Sobe intersection, said it was similar to the country's deadliest bombing that happened on the 14th October 2017, which killed nearly 600 people. The country has a fragile healthcare system, and its health minister says it is difficult to provide air evacuation for the hundreds of wounded individuals. Somalia's government launched a blood donation campaign as the few hospitals in the capital have been overwhelmed. The country does not have a national blood bank to save lives during such a crisis, and private hospitals were charging the bombing victims for blood transfusions. We go to Nigeria. A top advisor to Nigeria's government has described as irresponsible and unnecessary the recent warnings by several Western countries of possible terror attacks in the capital Abuja and elsewhere in the country. Speaking after a meeting of Nigeria's intelligence and military chiefs on Monday, chaired by the President, National Security Advisor Babagana Munguna told journalists that any exaggerated sense of insecurity was unfounded and that the situation in Abuja was under control. There were similar words from the Foreign Ministry, Geoffrey Onyema, who said Nigeria's government was in full engagement with foreign partners to make sure cooperation with them in a constructive way and not in alarmist manner. Last week, the US, UK, Canada, Ireland and Australia warned of possible terror attacks in parts of Nigeria and urged their citizens against traveling there. The alerts sparked public anxiety and tensions across the country as it grapples with various security problems, including violence by extremists and kidnappings for ransom by armed criminal gangs. And Ukraine is continuing to ship grain out of some of its Black Sea ports despite Russia having pulled out of the deal and unblocked such exports. Moscow took the step on Saturday when its navy was attacked in occupied Crimea. The UN and Turkey continue to implement the deal which they brokered. A number of cargo ships are currently heading south along the maritime humanitarian corridor, including one that's carrying wheat to drought-stricken Horn of Africa. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has warned that the latest export attempts were dangerous and not guaranteed to succeed. And then the latest on the Democratic Republic of Congo's conflict. Thousands of protesters marched through Goma, the main city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, accusing Rwanda of backing local rebels. Kinshasa has expelled the Rwandan ambassador, accusing Kigali of supporting the M23 rebels. Rwanda denies this. Eastern DRC has seen a spike in hostilities this month as the M23 advanced towards Goma. The UN peacekeeping force has been put on high alert. A mostly Congolese Tutsi group, the M23 resumed fighting late last year, after lying dormant for years. It accuses Kinshasa of failing to honor an agreement to integrate its fighters into the army. And then we go to the Central African Republic. A special court in Central African Republic has issued its first conviction against 3 militiamen over war crimes committed in 2019 in the northwest of the country. Rebel controlled 2/3 of the country, which is still reeling from a civil war. Monday's ruling is a historic conviction by the Special Criminal Court that was established in Bangui 4 years ago to prosecute war crimes committed in the Central African Republic since 2003. Issa Saleh Tadum and Osman Yuba were jailed for 20 years each, while Tahir Mohammed received a life sentence for killing dozens of civilians in northwestern Central African Republic in 2019. The three convicted were members of the 3R rebel group that was formed in 2015 during the sectarian conflict in the Central African Republic. Their conviction, however, is a long way from deterring deadly violence by dozens of militia groups active in the country. Despite being pushed back by the army backed by the Russian mercenaries, vast parts of the mineral-rich country remain under rebel control. Several other militia leaders are facing war crimes cases at the Hague-based International Criminal Court over the Central African Republic's civil war. A 2019 peace deal between the CAR government and key rebel groups unraveled when the latter mounted an insurrection to remove President Faustin Todore from power. And African leaders have joined other world leaders in congratulating Brazil's President-elect Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was declared the winner of presidential runoff. Mozambican President Filipe Nyusi said that Lula's victory was achieved through perseverance, humility and faith in justice. He termed the triumph an act of courage by Brazilians towards a stronger and fairer country. Kenya's President William Ruto said he looked forward to a closer relations with Brazil, sentiments that were shared by his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa. We head back to Nigeria, and the Nigerian army has repelled an attack on a military base in western Nigeria where nearly 1,700 jihadists are being held, killing 8 suspected insurgents affiliated with the Islamic State group, 2 military sources said on Monday. Dozens of Islamic State in West Africa ISWAP fighters tried to break into the Wawa military base in Niger State near the border with Benin on Saturday. to free hundreds of jihadists, the two officers told AFP on condition of anonymity. The attack is a reminder of ISWAP's ability to strike hundreds of kilometers from its northeastern stronghold where the army is fighting a 13-year-old jihadist insurgency. 3 attackers, including their commander, were captured in the attack, he added. There were no official comment from the army. The soldiers had been alerted by intelligence and were waiting for the insurgents to attack the base, said the second officers, who gave the same account. The heavily armed jihadists tried to blow up the base gates but met stiff resistance from the soldiers, they added. Last July, ISWAP fighters attacked Kuje prison located near the capital Abuja and freed hundreds of detainees, including many jihadi commanders. Between 2017 and 2018, the Wawa base had been used as a court to try hundreds of Boko Haram and ISWAP jihadists. On Friday, the Nigerian police tightened security, especially in the capital, after the US and UK warned of an increased risk of terrorist attack in Abuja. We go to Cameroon now, and Cameroon says Equatorial Guinea has deported several hundred Cameroonians, some of whom say they were fleeing terrorist and rebel attacks at home. The government of Equatorial Guinea says the deportees were economic migrants and is planning to deport 7,000 more Cameroonians in all by the end of the year. Scores of Cameroonians applauded Monday while welcoming back at least 200 of their citizens who were deported. But the well-wishers are not happy with Equatorial Guinea's actions. Civilians shouted that by deporting Cameroonians, the oil-rich country is being indifferent to people who have rendered services as skilled workers and other types of workers. Some deportees say they were tortured and their property looted in Equatorial Guinea. Others say they spent several nights in detention centers and were freed after agreeing to return to Cameroon unconditionally. We head over to South Sudan. Political and military leaders of the group formerly known as the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance have renamed themselves the non-signatories ahead of the Rome peace talks. Garang Malual, the spokesperson of South Sudan United Front under Malong Awan, said the former SOMA has now rebranded as non-signatories. The new name was agreed in the Italian capital Rome following meetings with IGAD and Troika partners 2 weeks ago. The meeting, convened by faith-based St. Egidio community, brought together Generals Paul Malong of SSUF, Thomas Cirillo of the National Salvation Front, and Pagan Amum of the Real SPLM. Cirillo, whose armed group, the NAS, previously abandoned the SSOMA, participated in the dialogue to prepare the opposition leaders for the next round of talks, the delegation of the Juba-based unity government. The Rome peace process stalled in August last year after President Kiir pulled out of the talks, accusing NAS of an attack that killed 2 Catholic nuns along the Nimule-Juba highway. But at the recent graduation of the unified forces in Juba, President Salva Kiir called on their hold groups to join the peace process. And he said his government was ready to work with the group to end the conflict. And then the latest on the ongoing Ethiopia mediation peace process, talks between the Ethiopian government and the rebel authorities in Tigray aimed at finding a peaceful resolution to the devastating 2-year conflict was continuing into Monday, a diplomat said. The negotiations led by the African Union began last Tuesday in South Africa, the final formal dialogue to try to end a war that has killed many thousands of people and unleashed a desperate humanitarian crisis in northern Ethiopia. South Africa had initially said the talks being held in Pretoria will run until Saturday, but they remain shrouded in secrecy. Eber Kalondo, a spokesperson for AU chairperson Musa Faki Mohammed, said in a message to AFP that there was no date limitation to put on the talks. As those close to the Tigray delegation in South Africa had told AFP at the weekend that the talks would likely continue until Tuesday, that is today. Since the negotiations began, fighting has continued unabated in Tigray, where government troops backed by the Eritrean army and regional forces have been waging artillery, bombardments and airstrikes, capturing a string of towns from the rebels. Diplomatic efforts to try to bring the government and the rebels to the negotiating table gathered pace after combat resumed late August, top doing a 5-month truce that had allowed limited amounts of aid into Tigray. And then we look at the latest, going back to Nigeria. The President Muhammad Buhari has left for the UK for a routine medical checkup. His special advisor said on Monday he is due to return to Nigeria in the second week of this month. Femi Adesina said in a statement on Twitter. Mr. Buhari, 79, has regularly sought treatment abroad since he assumed presidency in 2015. And he has often been criticized for seeking treatment outside the country while Nigeria's healthcare system suffers from mismanagement and underfunding. His time as president for 2 consecutive terms comes to an end in February when the country holds a general election. And then I think that is where we end the news this morning. You are now up to date with the news from across the continent of Africa. As usual, a lot to unpack there, but I have some help in the name of Samuel Tawish, our in-house analyst and journalist from Nairobi. Samuel Tawish, a very good morning to you.
Very good morning indeed to you, Miriam Mobutu from our communication headquarters. Good morning also to our viewers who are watching this program here in Nairobi, Africa, and the rest of the world. Indeed, it's my pleasure to join you on Good Morning Africa this morning.
Okay, so you were listening very patiently, and a lot of this news and what is ongoing across the continent. Can we just start from the news that I just ended with? And this is President Buhari. We know every now and then he's always visiting the UK, especially the UK. I think that's where he goes for his medical checkup. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he has been criticized of always seeking medical attention abroad, and not just Buhari, but a lot of our African leaders. And there's a time he went there in the middle of medical staff workers in Nigeria. I think the doctors were on strike for a lengthy period of time, demanding for better working conditions and, pay rise and things like that. And so there were conversations around maybe Africa needs to put some policies in place that our leaders must seek. If they're sick, that they must seek for medical attention here and in their countries. And also, the children should go to school in their countries, because a lot of times the government, the public institutions like the education, the schools and healthcare systems are not well funded and not in their best shape. And so analysts have been arguing the leadership does not do much to address these issues that affect a lot of people who depend on these public services, because they have an alternative. If they're sick, like Buhari is sick, he always goes to the UK to be attended to. And their children, of course, don't even study in these countries in Africa. They study abroad. So perhaps if they sought their medical treatment or attention here, and especially in their countries, perhaps obviously they'll go to the best hospitals even in their countries, but they might see that the underbelly in our health system especially, and do something about it. I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Our leadership seeking such important services outside of the continent while they don't do much to change the situations in their countries.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And indeed, it's a great pity and a very unfortunate that we have a leadership in the continent of Africa that does not believe in its own nations. It does not believe in its own people. It does not believe in the capacity of their own people and people who elected them into those offices, Miriam. When you make reference of President Buhari of Nigeria, Miriam, a case in point, really, it speaks volume, Miriam, and it's a big statement he's passing across. And this is not something that is unique to President Buhari only. I think it's something that features on most African leaders and also elites in the African continent, that whenever they fall sick, whenever they want to seek medical attention, they'll always think of going to overseas or to the European nations, because one, they believe they have the right personnel in terms of doctors, they have the right drugs, they have the good facilities in those countries, and that is why they prefer to go to those nations really to seek that very, very important service. But again, Miriam, the question is, why don't we make the same back here at home? Why can't we make sure that we have proper facilities? Why don't we make sure that we have enough and required drugs in our facilities, why don't we make sure that we have doctors, trained doctors in our hospitals, and we pay them very well so that they have the morale even to administer such very essential services to our people and including even our leaders. So when you see the leadership in the African continent really fly out to overseas or even to these other nations, it does speak volume about our capacity. It speaks volume about, of course, the conditions of our facilities here in the African continent. So it's a very big challenge, and this challenge really goes down to the leadership itself. And for President Buhari, it's been synonymous to going out seeking medical attention. Look unto the former and now late president of Tanzania, that is John Pombe Magufuli, aka Bulldozer. You could clearly see that he had set a very good example in this continent of Africa. That even at a point he fell sick. At a point he felt like he needed medical attention. He could always go not only to the local hospitals or hospitals in Tanzania, but he made sure that he went to the, of course, to the public hospitals. And I remember even during the time when his mother was sick, she was being treated at a public facility in Tanzania, and he had set a very good example. That in itself also instills some level of confidence in the people you lead, in the sense that they will believe and have trust in these facilities to be able to administer these essential services. And secondly, it also speaks a volume about what kind of trust the leaders really have on these very facilities. And also it will give them, of course, an opportunity or a glimpse of what kind of medication or treatment or services do ordinary people really get or get whenever they get to this public facility. So it's a very big challenge, Miriam, and I think for President Buhari is just one of the examples we have in the continent of Africa. I think almost or virtually every leader and those who think like they have money, whenever they fall sick, they have to fly out and seek this medical attention outside this continent. But I think it is possible that we can set up the same facilities here in the African continent. We can be able to train. In fact, we have very well trained doctors, save for a brain drain, where people, when we cannot pay them well, they choose to go to overseas and work there. And so we are left with inadequate trained and qualified doctors here in our country. So I think there are so many areas really we will need to tackle if we need to get to the levels of those other developed nations, so that we can have our people really get these medications back here at home. And I also want to thank the immediate former president of Kenya. You can imagine, Miriam, today, we have several cancer centers here in Kenya, and today you need not necessarily have to fly, say, to India or any other nation outside the Kenya really to seek cancer treatment and medication, because President Kenyatta, the now immediate former, really made sure that we have those facilities here in the country, we have doctors here in the country, and also we have drugs that can be able to take care of our people here. And even our neighboring countries, people fly to Kenya today to come and seek such kind of medication here in the country. It's a thumbs up to the former president. I think these are things we need to emulate. The leadership in the African continent, we need to emulate, so that our people need not necessarily to fly out to seek these essential services. I submit, Miriam.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much. And of course, President Muhammadu Buhari flew out of the country after having a meeting with the security intelligence in the country. Well, some good news. The Nigerian army says it repelled an attack on a military base in western Nigeria, where nearly 1,700 jihadists are being held, killing 8 suspected insurgents affiliated with Islamic State group, two military sources said on Monday. So it's like the group wanted to attack a prison and release a good number of their fighters who have been jailed in Kuje prison located near the capital Abuja. But this comes on a backdrop of the security alert that has been issued, or that was issued with a number of countries. Let me just look for that story, because that has angered a section of Nigerian leaders, and they're saying these security alerts are unnecessary and not warranted. So against the backdrop of the terror alerts issued by both the United States and the United Kingdom last week, the federal government on Monday assured Nigerians to go about their lawful businesses as the country is safe and secure. The government also came down hard on the United States mission in Nigeria, the British High Commission and other foreign missions over the terror, I just had breakfast. The terror alert they issued last week. The federal government dismissed the security advisories, describing them as false, insisting that it was irresponsible to give signals of heightened insecurity in the country when there was no basis for it. So we've been looking at the insecurity in Nigeria, the kidnappings for ransom, the Boko Haram activities, the ISWAP, and all these groups that have been really causing heightened insecurity in Nigeria. Do you think these foreign countries, in their assessment, could there be a possibility that the security alert they issued had some basis, or it was just sensational as Nigerian government now is trying to portray it?
Well, Miriam, instead of the Nigerian government coming out to blanketly dismiss, reports by the US and other nations who have issued the security alerts on its citizen and specifically on Nigeria, they should be able to really look out on areas of cooperation between themselves and these nations in terms of the security front, and share the intelligence report with the security apparatus in Nigeria so that they are able really to act on any impending attack in Nigeria instead of blanketly dismissing it. More often than not, Miriam, we've seen whenever US and other European nations issue such kind of alerts to nations, we've seen incidences of insecurity, terror attacks really happening. And I do not think that they do this with any ill will. It's more of one safeguarding the security and the lives of its people who live in these nations. And also, I think it's an eye-opener to the security apparatus to be able to act on any impending attack, or maybe people who are planning to commit such kind of heinous crime. So it is important that the Nigerian government looks out on ways of cooperation between themselves and these nations, because, Miriam, if the US, for instance, is in a position really to disclose or to be able to foretell that there's an impending attack, say in a given town or in a given nation or in a specific village, then I think they can go to the extent of sharing the same information to the government officials and particularly the security apparatus for them to be able, to be alert and make sure that there's no harm that is going to be caused on the civilians in that country. So I think Nigeria should not come out to blanketly dismiss, but I understand the position they are in, because normally you will see governments come out and dismiss such kind of reports because, again, it's more of it forces a kind of tension and anxiety amongst the citizenry and also those who intend to travel to those countries in terms of visitors, the tourists will be skeptical really touring such countries for fear of being attacked or maybe being caught up in such kind of melee. So generally, it is in the interest of Nigeria to come out and dismiss, but I think not in the way they are doing it. They should instead find ways of cooperation and make sure that even in the face of such kind of impending attacks, that they do not necessarily happen, because they will be able to curtail and contain the same media.
Mm-hmm. Now, the US, the UK, and later Canada, Germany, and Bulgaria have warned the nationals in Nigeria of an impending terrorist attack and asked them to avoid travel to Abuja. They noted that suspected terrorists could target government buildings, places of worship, schools, markets, shopping malls, hotels, bars, restaurants, sports gatherings, transport terminals, law enforcement facilities, and international organizations. All this list that these countries are citing. We've had attacks in all these places. I mean, it's not new. So the US subsequently permitted its non-essential staff and their families to leave the country in an updated travel advice. The warnings triggered panic and tensions across the country, especially in Abuja, the nation's capital, as many workers stayed away from the office while the roads were devoid of traffic. In response to the apprehension created by the alert, the popular Jabil Mall under construction company shut down, citing security concerns. To allay fears, the security forces launched a counterintelligence operation which led to the arrest of several terror suspects, like I say there, including 2 persons at the Trade Mall Estate, a satellite town in the federal capital. The operatives also carried out patrols while the military and police mounted checkpoints at strategic parts of the capital. So as much as the Nigerian government is coming so hard on these alerts and dismissing them as having no basis at all, because that's what they said after the meeting yesterday, but security threats in Nigeria is a real thing. It's a real thing. And the Nigerians in certain parts of that country who have been living in anxiety for years now, it's not a new thing. So whatever these governments are saying, it's really not new. That is the state of the insecurity. I understand what level of anxiety this could and concern these alerts could create, but from the news that we get from Nigeria and what we see happen and how the government have been handling the issue of security has been wanting. So would they rather have shared this intelligence information with the Nigerian government quietly, or what would have been the best approach in the name of the public interest at this point?
Miriam, to the extent that the US and those other nations, including Canada and others that really issued the security alert on its citizen in Nigeria, really makes sense to the effect that they must have shared the same with the security apparatus in Nigeria. And it is not like when they do, they have to come out to the public to really inform that they have had discussions with the security apparatus to that effect. I don't think that because, again, there's a representation in terms of government's levels in, in Nigeria from those respective nations. And it only serves the interest of the host nation really to get this intelligence report from such as this, because again, security alert, Miriam, and security threat is not something that you just treat so casually. And even in an attempt to try and deal with the complex insecurity, say for example in Nigeria, which has now become synonymous with the issue of the Boko Haram terror attacks and so many security threats that occur every now and then. Miriam, I think, those governments must have gone to the level of sharing this information with the government so that they are able to act on those reports and see what they can be able to do to avert any kind of attack on its citizens in Nigeria. So I think it is not something that they just wake up today and decided to, or by the time they come out to the public, Miriam, they must have shared this information. And one will then wonder why Nigeria is openly castigating these nations really for issuing such kind of threats. I do not think there's any hidden agenda behind this kind of security alerts, because again, one would ask, why not Kenya? Why not Uganda? Why not any other nation but Nigeria? You want to tell me they are issuing these security threats because they don't love Nigeria, or because there's anything, there's any driving agenda behind such kind of security alerts being issued by these nations? Not necessarily, Miriam. I think it is just a general observation, and what US and these other European nations are now synonymous with, because whenever they find out that there's an impending attack, they usually issue those security alerts. I remember even when we were having elections right here in Kenya just a couple of months ago, and you remember when they were issuing security alerts on their citizens who live here in Kenya, that they should not travel, say, in this city or in this part of Kenya because there's probably an impending, maybe violence or something occasioned by the ongoing election and maybe the Supreme Court verdict and such kind of thing. So I don't think that I mean, they will just issue those security alerts for nothing in Nigeria. Instead, Nigeria should take that intelligence information and act on it to be able to avert any impending attack. So not necessarily blanketly, rather dismissing such kind of reports, Miriam.
Very well, thank you so much. But that security alert they issued on some cities here in this country, I don't know, it didn't turn out as they said. But anyway, it's good to take precautions. I'll digress from that. I didn't like that. But anyway, let's head over to South Sudan. And political and military leaders of the groups formerly known as the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance, that is the SSOMA, have renamed themselves the non-signatories ahead of the Rome peace talks. Garang Maluel, the spokesperson of the South Sudan United Front under Malong Awan, said the former SSOMA has now rebranded as non-signatories. The new name was agreed in the Italian capital Rome following meetings with IGAD and Troika partners 2 weeks ago. The meeting, convened by the faith-based group St. Gideon Community, brought together Generals Paul Malong of SSUF, Thomas Cirillo of the National Salvation Front, and Pagan Amum of the Real SPLM. Cirillo, whose armed group, the NAS, previously abandoned the SSOMA, participated in the dialogue to prepare the opposition leaders for the next round of talks with the delegation of the Juba-based unity government. The Rome peace process stalled in August last year after President Salva Kiir pulled out of the talks, accusing NAS of an attack that killed 2 Catholic nuns along the Nimule-Juba highway. So we know that the peace process in South Sudan has also been very fragile. I don't know how there's not been so much progress being made. I know maybe 2 months ago, we saw the graduation of the first batch of the unified force. That was one of the key requirements under the revitalized peace agreement of 2018 for South Sudan to have a unified force. You know, their forces are still fragmented, and they base their allegiance on the different leaders that they support. So that has been a challenge that has also intensified the insecurity in South Sudan. You can't have an army that is divided. So they have now a unified force, but these leaders that I mentioned here, they were not part of the signatories. They were not signatories to the revitalized peace agreement. They say they were not. They were not sorted out for, and perhaps they're parts of that agreement they don't agree with fully. So they used to call themselves the South Sudan Opposition Movement, and now they're calling themselves the non-signatories. When you have such names, and yet we want peace in South Sudan, are we moving forward, or what are we doing? Non-signatories.
Miriam, in the continent of Africa, that is what defines democracy, and you'll often see leaders really ditching that one alliance and forming another one, ditching this ally and teaming up with another one. I mean, that has become the norm and the tradition today in the African continent in the name of democracy. And I think that is the interpretation that our leaders and our people have when you talk about democracy, that they can be able to join this alliance today and ditch that one today and form another one tomorrow. I mean, that is what has become our norm today. But I think, Miriam, it is important that even in the face of forming these alliances, they should be forming these alliances with the best interest, or in the best interest of the people of South Sudan. Because again, Miriam, it's not important for leaders just to seek to pursue their own interests only. But I think even when they form these alliances, or even when they ditch one and form another one, they should have the blessings of the people whom they lead. Because by the end of the day, what the people of South Sudan really need is not the contestation of the leadership or the political leadership in South Sudan. What they need is, of course, that unity of purpose, that the people can come together and not only pursue their political power interests, but make sure that through these avenues that they are able to champion the interests of the people. I think that is what matters by the end of the day. But that has not been the case, of course, in South Sudan. We understand how things have been there. It has been dicey ever since they got their own country, independence for that matter. I mean, it has been fights after fights. It has been disintegration after disintegration. I mean, their leaders have never found reason to sit together and forge a unity of purpose. You've seen Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. They have been, at loggerheads all along, as long as we can remember. So, Miriam, I think even when these leaders decide now to form these alliances, they must be cognizant of the fact that the people of South Sudan are in dire need of that unity of their leadership. And because when the leadership is united, no doubt the people will be united. But when you have leaders really fighting or pulling in different directions, it boils down even to the people that they are leading. So it is important that they put the interests of the people first, even as they pursue political power. Because again, Miriam, you cannot say that for you to be able to champion the interests of the people or address the myriad of challenges, you need to get to a position of policy making. You'll need to be in a position of being able to give directions, and that talks about leadership. If you cannot grab power, if you cannot be in leadership, then it becomes in itself an uphill task for you to be able to champion the interests of the people. So it is one thing really to pursue this power, but it should be anchored on the interests of the people, and that which is going to make sure that the people identify with, and the people are going to really support this pursuit for power, Miriam.
Okay, and in an ideal world, that is what we should be expecting, that the interest of the people and the country comes first. But unfortunately, in South Sudan, perhaps they come from the theory of realist. The end justifies the means. As long as they get what they want and they stay in power and they continue prolonging this process, they get what they want and they're fine. So people and their interest, I don't think that's what they wake up in the morning thinking about. That's not what I see being exhibited by South Sudan's leadership. So it's quite unfortunate, but the peace talks in Rome continues, I think, being chaperoned by Saint Egidio from group from the Vatican. So let's see if that will bring some reprieve. I mean, they went to the Vatican in 2019 when the Pope kissed their feet. It was called a spiritual retreat. We thought we'll have brand new leaders with a clear mind coming from Vatican to South Sudan. And how many years later, where are we? Yeah. Okay, so let's just hope for the best and move on to the latest as far as the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo is concerned. Thousands protested in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo yesterday, the city of Goma, denouncing Rwanda's alleged support of M23 rebels, as Kinshasa recalled its interim acting ambassador from Kigali. In a further searing of relations, the protest on Monday came as M23 have tightened their grip on the surrounding countryside. And a mostly Congolese Tutsi group, the M23, resumed fighting in late 2021 after lying dormant for years, accusing the Congolese government of failing to honor an agreement to integrate its fighters into the army. Now, the group's resurgence has destabilized regional relations in Central Africa, with the DRC accusing its smaller neighbor Rwanda of backing the rebel group. The front line between the Congolese military and the M23 had been calm for several weeks, but fresh clashes from October 20th saw the rebel group make advances across North Kivu province, and rebels in recent days seized the towns of Kiwanja and Ruchuru along the strategic highway leading to the provincial capital Goma, which lies on the Rwandan border. On Sunday, the DRC's government ordered the Rwandan ambassador Vincent Karega to leave the country within 48 hours. Rwanda stated that it had noted the decision with regret. The DRC's foreign ministry has recalled its interim charge d'affaires from Kigali and ordered its newly appointed ambassador to Rwanda not to register his credentials, it said in a statement on Monday. So it's just escalation upon escalation. I know the African Union is dealing with another urgent matter, the talks that are ongoing on Ethiopia's conflict in South Africa right now. I don't know how this is not as urgent. The AU made a statement the other day. Is that enough, or should AU have an urgent convening of a meeting to address this issue of the Democratic Republic of Congo as the escalation continues?
Miriam, in as much as we've not seen, so much in terms of public engagement or people getting to know exactly what the African Union is doing in as far as of course, the DR Congo situation is concerned. It's worth noting that, Miriam, by some of the African nations really making that decision to have troops in DR Congo in itself is a testament enough that there's so much that is happening behind the scene in terms of trying to contain the security situation in the insecurity, of course, in DR Congo. And just like you've asked, is it time that we'll need to see, the African Union leadership really convene an urgent meeting for that matter to address this situation, Miriam? I think it is necessary, and it is something that they should have done long ago, because we will not need to wait until property has been destroyed, until innocent lives have been lost in DR Congo. Is when we decide now to sit down and have and think about the action that we need to take in trying to deal with this situation. I think this is the moment really for the African Union really to act, to come out and act, and even if it means having more troops on ground, having a proper and renewed strategy in terms of dealing with the rebels, the M23 rebels in DR Congo is concerned. Because, Miriam, as it is today, and even looking onto the reports you are giving yesterday during yesterday's show, it is apparent that we continue. The situation is not yet in control as we speak. And we are even asking ourselves if it is a change of tact or a change of strategy from the security apparatus or from the boots on the ground, because you cannot continue with an operation without an audit, without asking yourself what is it that you have achieved, what are the challenges, and what new thing you are able to do to be able to achieve that the ultimate objective that you have set yourself for. So yes, it is time that the African Union really needs to convene an urgent meeting to try and address this situation and see what better ways really to be able to approach the situation in DR Congo, Miriam.
Mm-hmm. And by the time you're seeing now the civilians, the Congolese coming out and protesting against Rwanda, this is not the first time. I remember when the East African community under then the able leadership of a former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was the chairperson, and the meeting they last held, I don't know if it was the last meeting, but they're supposed to be convening another meeting, I think, this week to discuss the same. And it was agreed upon that the EAC should form a force that will go into the Democratic of Congo and try to help in the conflict. And the citizens of DRC, I don't know if I don't know if the government sponsored those protests or it's just a feeling on the ground for the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But they said any other country is allowed to form a force except for Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi. Those three countries are not allowed because they are part of the people who are inciting and who are engaged and supporting some of the rebel groups in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So when you have a continued citizenry there protesting, now they're protesting against Rwanda, and we know even in the DRC they do have their local Tutsi community that also now have been caught up in this conflict. Is it posing a danger, and will they be a target? Because now, if that's how they feel about President Paul Kagame and M23, which we know is majority Tutsis, do you think the local Congolese community who from this community but locally could be a target, and would they be at risk? From the previous reports, we know they've been affected, but what does this mean for security of such people in the DRC?
Briefly, Miriam, instead of the Democratic Republic of Congo government or her people really doing what they're doing in terms of protest and demonstration to really express their displeasure on the part or involvement of Rwanda in as far as the fighting in DR Congo is concerned, they should engage diplomatically. I'm very sure. Of course, the government of DR Congo, led by its president, can be able to reach out to Rwandan President Paul Kagame and register formally her displeasure about what is happening in DR Congo and their perceived involvement in funding or supporting the M23 rebels. I do not think the issue of demonstrations and protest by the ordinary people will really augur well, because again, in the face of this demonstration, again, we are likely going to say destroy properties. We are going likely to lose also lives, because there will no doubt be altercation between the security apparatus and the protesters. And maybe just like you've alluded to, I also tend to imagine probably that government could have sponsored this demonstration against the government of Rwanda or the people of Rwanda. But it has a very big threat beyond what we are seeing, because again, when you allow the citizenry really to come out and engage in what they're doing, like what the DR Congo is doing today, in terms of open protest against a government of Rwanda and the people of Rwanda, you're likely going to see even the innocent civilians or people of Rwandan descent who live in Uganda being harmed or injured in the process. Because again, the Congolese will easily believe that really it is Rwanda who are funding the M23 rebels, and also giving resources to these rebels really to fight their government, and therefore will be posing a lot more danger and threats even to the innocent civilians, and more so those of Rwandan descent who live in Democratic Republic of Congo. I do not think we really need to get to go that route. Government has its own way of making communications. They can be able to reach out through their embassies. In fact, if the president of DR Congo today decided to go, Tshisekedi decided to fly to Rwanda and meet Paul Kagame, I don't think there'll be anything bad, or even make a call direct to him and really get us to understand what is going on, because they have not come out openly to tell us that maybe he has reached out to his Rwandan counterpart, and what has been his response in terms of the kind of allegation and the perception that his government is meddling with the affairs or the sovereignty of DR Congo. So the issue of threats, the issue of protests and demonstration, I do not think and I do not believe is the way to go. There are other avenues that they can be able to explore to register their displeasure in as far as what is happening today in DR Congo is concerned.
Okay, thank you so much. And we know that, and the reason we are staying on this story is because I think it's very important. It's a developing story, and the heightened increase of the escalation of this conflict has continued. Of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been accusing Rwanda of supporting the deadly M23 rebels, and Rwanda, on his part, has been consistent in denying these allegations. But in early August this year, actually, it would interest all of us to know that a very credible report by the United Nations, I'll just read that. Rwandan troops attacked soldiers into DR Congo, and repeatedly accused Rwanda of backing the militia, which stems from the long fallout from the 1994 genocide. So that has been the accusation. But there is a report. By the United Nations, a UN group of experts that did find solid evidence that Kigali is supporting the M23 fighters despite repeated, denials. And Rwandan troops, there's an attack that happened early August. So this report found out that the Rwandan troops indeed supported the M23 rebel groups with weapons and support. A United's group of experts said, citing solid evidence despite reiterated denials from Kigali. The Democratic Republic of Congo repeatedly accused Rwanda of backing the militia, which stems from the long fallout from the 1994 genocide. I think there's an afternoon I give out a whole history of what was the genesis of all this, and in Rwanda, and had captured areas of territory in recent months. Kigali repeatedly denied supporting M23, and the armed group maintains it does not receive support from Rwanda. So this UN group of experts said they found evidence without reasonable doubt that Rwanda indeed, especially in that attack that happened in August, supported the M23 rebels. So I think it's the question that we were asking here yesterday. While we are trying to firefight and send our soldiers there and all these things that stakeholders have been trying to do with an aim to find a solution, I haven't seen anybody deciding, okay, do we now sit down and talk about bring Rwanda on this side and DRC on this side and tell us what is going on? Democratic Republic of Congo, you were accusing Rwanda of doing this. What is the evidence? Rwanda, you've been denying, but you and experts have some evidence that indeed you've been supporting the M23 rebels. And in a 131-page report by the United Nations Security Council, experts found Rwanda launched military interventions into Congolese territory since last November 2021 that's seen the recent escalation and providing troop reinforcements for specific M23 operations. So if the UN Security Council has this evidence, what are we still doing? Why are we not handling the issue from where we should be handling it from?
Miriam, I think for now it just remains but allegations and accusations and counter accusations because as for DR Congo, we have not seen them go ahead and even bring to the public domain any evidence to the effect that Rwanda is trying to meddle with their...
But this is a UN report that was presented to the United Nations Security Council, and the UN experts who did their independent investigation found evidence that Rwanda was indeed supporting M23.
Yes, indeed. And if there's any evidence that points to that fact, then I think we should go ahead and call out Rwanda on its participation and support and also funding the M23 rebels, because I don't think it is really, prudent for Rwanda to come out and support the rebels who are threatening the stability of a democratic nation like DR Congo. If at all this is what Rwanda is doing. And I remember even there was a time when, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of Uganda, they had closed their borders with Rwanda, if I'm not very wrong?
Yes.
They have not, is it?
Mm-hmm. It's Rwanda, but they opened it.
Yeah, they opened it after, consultations and diplomatic reach outs, Miriam. It makes me start asking myself, what is it what is it about Rwanda? Because again, every of these nations and neighboring countries really had a problem with Rwanda from time to time. It's after lengthy discussion, lengthy diplomatic reach out, is when Uganda opened its borders with, of course, Rwanda. And today we are also seeing Democratic Republic of Congo really accusing Rwanda of meddling with its affairs and also allegedly sponsoring the works or actions by the M23 rebels. So I think it is time we need to call out.
Just to add on what you're saying, Burundi also had closed its borders with Rwanda, so they just opened it last week. So also it had a problem with Rwanda.
So this is something that I think must be addressed not only locally or by the leaders, say the leadership in Rwanda and of course DR Congo, but I think it should go to a level beyond even the African Union, to the United Nations Security Council for an intervention, so that by the end of the day we get to understand what interest does Rwanda have, say in DR Congo, to the extent that they are now, or its government is now supporting the activities of the M23 rebels in DR Congo. Miriam, this is something that is not acceptable, and Rwanda must be called out on this. I don't think there's more that needs to be said about this. Indeed, like you've said, that there are facts that point to the effect that Rwanda is meddling with the affairs, and in fact to the extent of sponsoring the activities of a rebel group in a sovereign nation. I think, Miriam, that is really going beyond the borders and going beyond the security treaties that Rwanda is part of. I don't think Rwanda wants to live as an island in the continent of Africa, and more so in the East Africa region. They will need the participation. They are part and parcel of this regional bloc. They will need the participation at one point. They will need the participation of the rest of the African countries in their affairs, but not in the manner that they are being accused of in terms of sponsoring rebel activities in DR Congo. This is not something that is acceptable, and I agree with you that it is time the UN Security Council really needs to intervene, and not only by words, by calling out on the leadership in Rwanda, specifically President Paul Kagame, because if you talk about Rwanda sponsoring, or even the M23 rebels in DR Congo getting, say, for example, the the fighting weaponry from Rwanda. They cannot get those weaponry without the blessing of the government, which is being led by President Paul Kagame himself. So they should call out on the leadership in Rwanda and bring on table all these leaders to see how we can be able to find an amicable solution to this crisis, and how even Rwanda can be able to even give or donate the troops, her troops, to help in the operation that is being carried out in DR Congo. Because these misgivings about nations between nations really is not very good, because we might see this explode to the level that Rwanda now and DR Congo formally begin fighting each other, which is a situation that we will not really want to see.
Okay. So that report that was presented to the United Nations Security Council and that investigation that was done by independent UN experts, a part of it said that the columns of soldiers who wore standardized military attire, those ones that were accused of supporting the M23 rebels, bore close resemblance of Rwandan army uniforms, the report added. Some 300 Rwandan troops also conducted operations against rebel groups in eastern DRC as the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, a Rwandan Hutu rebel group that Kigali views as a threat and that also Rwanda has accused the Democratic Republic of Congo of supporting. The UN report also found the Congolese army supported militias. So the Congolese army, and I think, Tawish, you've been insisting on this point, the DRC also does have some responsibility in this conflict, as in this report, it was also found to be supporting militias, I think one of them being the FDLR, and active in the east of the country. So a coalition of armed groups formed in May with the knowledge of Congolese officers. This is a new coalition armed group. So it was formed with the knowledge of Congolese officers. The report said leaders of several militias confirmed to the experts that the Congolese army provided them with weapons and ammunition. So Felix Tshisekedi is not innocent in this one as well.
You're right, Miriam, but as the adage goes, two wrongs do not make a right. And by virtue of Tshisekedi or the government of DR Congo having meddled or sponsored the rebel activities in the past, doesn't necessarily mean that the acts by Rwanda, although it remains just as an allegation, justified, Miriam. So I think we need not really to go. It's not. I don't think that it's payback time to DR Congo, that because at some point they did sponsor rebel activities, and therefore Rwanda also, or any other nation for that matter, can now, or it legalizes actions by any nations ready to go and sponsor or support or even fund the rebel activities in DR Congo. I think that should not be the way to go. This is the time we need to demonstrate our unity as the East African Regional Bloc, and demonstrate our unity towards our brothers and sisters in DR Congo, because Miriam, such kind of activities are a very big threat to human life. It is going to destabilize the livelihood of the people in DR Congo, in terms of even the education. The young kids will not be able to go to school, are not going to school for that matter. They're not able to access the essential services. Life is going to be disrupted generally, and we will not want to see that. And any nation can fall victim tomorrow. So I think it is time for us to rise to the occasion and help Democratic Republic of Congo government to flash out and deal with these M23 rebels and the threats that they are posing to that nation.
All right, and as we conclude on this subject, the DRC and Rwanda have had strained relations since the mass influx of Rwandan Hutus accused of slaughtering Tutsis during the 1994 Rwandan genocide. The M23 was formed in 2012, claiming to defend the interests of the Congolese Tutsis, a group sharing the ethnicity of Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, against Hutu militias. Since May, the M23 has waged its most sustained offensive in years, killing dozens and displacing tens of thousands of people. By July, it controlled a territory almost 3 times as large as it did in March, the UN group said in that report. The M23's resurgence has inflamed regional tensions and spurred deadly protests against the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which civilians accuse of failing to protect them. So that is the latest there on that story. I think Even as we conclude the show this morning, I think we will not do justice until if we don't bring the latest update on that mediation process on the Ethiopia-Tigray conflict that is ongoing in South Africa. We've not heard any updates, and I think the mediation process has continued till today. So the talks between the Ethiopian government and the rebel authorities in Tigray, aimed at finding a peaceful resolution to the devastating two-year conflict, continued to Monday, and I think up to today. It started last Tuesday in South Africa, the first formal dialogue to try to end a war that has killed many thousands of people and unleashed a desperate humanitarian crisis in northern Ethiopia. So there is no, I don't know if there's any, let me just see if I can get, but by the time I was coming here, there was no official, update on, all right, I see there's some here. So let me just read a bit of it, I think from the BBC, the latest on the mediation process that is ongoing in South Africa. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says there is heavy foreign interference in the continuing talks between the government and Tigray administration, but remains hopeful a peace pact will be reached. Speaking to the China Global Television Network CGTN, Mr. Abiy said Ethiopians can solve their matters despite international pressure for a ceasefire. He's quoted as saying, of course, if there are lots of interventions from left and right, it's very difficult. Mr. Abiy said Ethiopians should understand we can solve our own issues by ourselves. He also confirmed the Federal Army's capture of the Tigray towns of Shire, Aksum and Adwe last month from the rebel Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. He said that we are trying to convince TPLF to respect the law of the land, to respect the constitution and to act as one state in Ethiopia. Meanwhile, a spokeswoman for the African Union Mission Chairperson Musa Faki Mohammed on Monday said there's no date limitation on the talks. So from the mediation team and from Musa Mohammed Faki's office, that is the AU chairperson, the mediation will go on as long as it's necessary for the peace talks to continue. Though they were expected to end on Sunday, they are now pushed again to Monday and today as well. So there is no report from that. And the negotiations began on 25th October, as I said. So the Prime Minister is saying there's heavy foreign interference in the continuing talks between the government and Tigray administration. And I think when we've been having this conversation, I think the issue of foreign interference has also been very loud and very present in this conflict, as many other conflicts across Africa. And is insisting Ethiopia has the capacity and capability of solving its own problems. I mean, that is what we had hoped they would do until they couldn't. Tawish, is this a government really looking forward to perhaps finding a peaceful resolution within itself and its people?
Miriam, the government of Ethiopia has no choice, but the only choice is really to find peace in the ongoing conflict in Ethiopia. Because again, it is in the best interest of the people of Ethiopia and in the best interest of the region, the East Africa region, that Ethiopia finds peace with herself. And that is why you see it holds a very strategic position in the African continent. And clearly, as it's manifested, you can see the kind of invigorated effort that the leadership in the African continent has put forth to make sure that we find a solution to the crisis that is in Ethiopia. The African Union has stepped up efforts, and today, as just like you've alluded to, of course, there is that ongoing mediation in South Africa that is led by former President Olusegun Obasanjo and former President of Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta. And I'm very, very optimistic, Miriam, that by the end of these talks, I will be able to see white smoke in Ethiopia, that there will be a breakthrough, that there will be ceasefire by the end of the day, so that the Ethiopian people can be able to live together as brothers and sisters. And the kind of fighting that we are seeing mostly in the Tigray region can come to an end, Miriam. These are not things that we take pride in our continent. We do not want to see this infighting because, again, the instability in Ethiopia means the same for the neighboring countries and for the region. When, of course, there's an influx of refugees, it does also affect, say, the neighboring countries, for example, Kenya. So I think it is in our interest that Ethiopia can finally find a long-lasting solution to this conflict that it is in. But even the warring parties must demonstrate that honesty and sincerity and the genuineness in terms of the kind of peace talks that are ongoing, so that they come with no hidden cards, with no, of course, without any hidden agenda, with the ultimate objective of finding a long-lasting solution to this conflict. And when there's that determination by a leadership or by the warring parties to find a solution to this problem, then there's nothing that is impossible. It only takes one word from the leadership really to go down to the ground and announce to the people that we have mended fences with government, or government with the people of Tigray, and that is it, Miriam. And we'll be able to see those people really shake hands and continue to live together as one nation. And that is what we all look forward to. And we hope this the mediation team will be is up to the task really to find a solution to the conflict in Ethiopia.
Okay, and it's interesting what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said there, that what is currently ongoing and the government taking over some key cities in the Tigray region. He said, we are trying to convince the TPLF to respect the law of the land, to respect the constitution, and to act as one state in Ethiopia. And then you wonder, would there have been a better means to convince them in that manner without necessarily using military means? Would dialogue would have been the best option, or what other ways would perhaps the Ethiopian government would have used to ensure that the TPLF understands the law of the land, as the Prime Minister says, and also respect the constitution and act within the parameters that are agreeable within the Ethiopian federal government? Okay, I don't know if Tawish is present, but I think that is where we will stop this morning on the show. I think there would have been other ways. There would have been other means to, perhaps go about this. But at that time, at the start of this war, it felt as though the TPLF were daring the government. Remember, they went ahead to have elections against, the government's position at that time, and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed kept postponing these elections. And, the TPLF said, we will have our elections in Tigray, and, you don't dare stop us. And so it looked as if it was egging on the government, and look at what that has brought the country to. But I still believe that the conflict and how it has escalated, that should have been the last resort. Perhaps there are other ways. If they would have explored, they would still have achieved the same thing that they wanted to achieve, without the unnecessary deaths and loss of lives and loss of properties and the destruction that we've been seeing permeating in that region and in other areas. In Ethiopia, a lot of conflicts this morning from the continent. I'm exhausted. I need to take a break now. And that is where we end our show this morning. My name is Miriam Aguto. This has been Good Morning Africa. Good morning.